Welcome to gCaptain Live. I'm your host, John Konrad, founder and CEO of gCaptain. Well, it's Friday afternoon, guys, and we published a lot of amazing news articles today, and choosing which ones to talk about and not talk about, there are too many great options. It's Friday evening. And I just wanted to instead try something a little new here. Just talk about a topic that's very important to a lot of people at sea and shipping. And what the topic I wanted to discuss is one of the most asked about questions that I get when I go around the world and go to conferences and talk to mariners. It's any advice that I have for the new third mate. So third mate's just coming aboard ship, and what advice do I have for them? On the other side of the equation, I talk to captains and chief mates, chief engineers, and they often ask me, how do I be a better leader, or how do I deal with the millennials? They seem so different from you and I, John. How do I be an effective leader to the young third mate? And part of the problem there, the question is, some of the disconnect is just different levels of age and experience. We were all third mates once. We all made mistakes, and we all had a different outlook on things in the future than we do now. And we often forget what it's like to get aboard ship for the first time. I remember after graduating SUNY Maritime, the school put together a talk for new mates, and it was supposed to be a question and an answer period. We had ship captains come in and some industry experts, and we were told we could ask any question that we wanted. And one of the very first questions one of my classmates asked is, what do we bring on board ship? For the first time, what gear do we bring? And the professor looked a little confused, and then he said, "Oh, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, do I bring towels? Do I bring shaving gear? Do I bring toilet paper?" And the professor got very angry. He said, "This is not Boy Scout camp, guys. I want real questions. I want professional questions. You're going to embarrass me in front of these industry executives if you ask these questions." And I remember vividly looking over to the kid who asked the question and nodding and saying, "I have the same question too." Well, we're not going to get into the specifics on what actually to bring, but I think it leads the broader question, the bigger question he was asking is, what are those things on ship that we didn't learn at school? What are the important things I need to know for my job as third mate in order to look back at this experience and really, as a wonderful experience and do a good job when I'm out there? And for the captains and the chief mates out there who are managing and leading millennials, new third mates, guys right out of college, I am not going to address your concerns in this episode specifically, but in talking to new third mates and millennials, I think it's a value to you because I hope to provide some insight into their mindset and maybe some new ways to look at the problem on how to work together. I want to start this episode by commenting on a talk that really got me thinking about this first. There's this individual, he's a licensed maid, I believe he works onshore now, James Spear. Young guy, he's a millennial himself, and he gave a conference talk at the Nautical Institute. I was brought in as the final speaker. I talked about bridge design, some of the problems with bridge equipment design. And he was brought in by the Nautical Institute to talk about the millennials' perspective. And I think he brought in some excellent tips and excellent ways to look at it from a millennial's point of view. Like I said, some of the problems that we have as captains in leading young third mates is just we forget ourselves and we're in it. We forget what it's like to be there, or we look at it different from how it actually was. But there are also fundamental changes with your generation as a third mate and my generation. And James Spear had this wonderful presentation where he talked about that. And I'm going to bring it up here. If I can bring up Keynote. And his question is, who are millennials? Let me slide only. All right, and this was the beginning of his presentation. Again, I'm going to mention James. He's a friend of mine and a really smart individual. Let me bring up slide 1 so he gets full credit. James Spear, he was third officer at the time, and he's a regional director with NAMEPA. Anyway, what James said, first, he wanted to define millennials, individuals born between 1981 and 2000's, largest generation in American society at 80 million. So we know that already, but he has this wonderful slide. I hope I didn't lose it. Millennial attributes, a mixed bag. So a lot of the complaints I hear about millennials from other captains and chief mates are, mentioned by James on this slide. And he says, first of all, some of us in the leadership positions look at millennials as impatient and entitled, financially struggling, broke, undedicated, disloyal, delayed development, unrealistic personal expectations, and a narcissistic view of the world. So this is not my words, not what I believe, but what James experienced. He interviewed a lot of captains, and he took the negative comments that were brought by people of my age and older, what the negative views were towards millennial. But James, in this presentation, did a wonderful job of explaining how these views are false. So he first looked at the impatient entitled, our new third mates, impatient and entitled, and he said that's really a sense of uncertainty in a changing world. When I was a new third mate, it was very apparent where my career was going and what was happening, and it was very shortly after I graduated that 9/11 happened. Things changed, but there was a set path that had been established for me so many years. There were also, it looked like the only thing I could really do was deep sea. When I graduated, I think there were only 6 or 8 guys that I knew directly who were able to get a job on board ship. They all worked on large ships. Almost everyone else had to get a job shoreside. There just weren't many jobs available at sea. And my generation was a social generation, and the thought of being out at sea, this was before internet, before connectivity, was really isolating to this guy. I remember Don Moore, a guy I graduated with, he decided, hey, I'm not going to go out to sea. I'm going to get a land job. And our navigation instructor at the time, we called him GPS, Greg Smith, wonderful instructor. He tried convincing Don and saying, hey, Don, what can I do to convince you to work on ships? And Don said, I will never forget it. He said, I'll tell you what, Greg. I will tonight, I'm going to set my alarm clock for 4 a.m. I'm going to sit down in my chair and I'm going to stare out my dorm room window. And if I just have a wonderful time doing that for the next 4 hours, I will take a job at sea. And we all laughed, but the job was a lot more isolating now. Now new millennials they're connected, and there are a lot more opportunities. Working offshore wasn't something anyone talked about. I ended up working with Transocean aboard drill ships, fascinating work. That wasn't even mentioned. No one in my class had done that before. We didn't even know about it. tugs and barges weren't an option. The pay was a lot lower then than it is now. Really, the only option was to sail deep sea. Now, there are a lot more options to new millennial third mates, and those options can be overwhelming. Which do I pick? Will I get pigeonholed in a specific type? Do I want to jump around a lot? I can't answer those questions here, but there's less certainty today than there was before. And to my generation, that can look impatient and that you're entitled. So a big part of this job, my advice to third mates, is choose that path. And even if you're looking to change companies, change where in the industry you're going to work, all right, when you're on that ship, treat it as this is going to be my career for the near future. Next one was financially struggling broke. And the reality, as James mentioned here, is your generation is a lot more efficient and frugal. It's part of the uncertainty in a changing world. It's part of the apps and the connectivity that you have and the ability to share and things and the desire to save. This is a really good thing, and it can come across to my generation as cheap and not willing to spend, but you need to explain your decisions. And, what I'm thinking of, there's very little that you have to bring on board ship, but make sure that you have proper gear, that you have good quality gear. My generation really puts a lot of pride in the quality of our coveralls and our boots. I remember when I first became third mate, I searched for months trying to find the perfect boot company and boots that would last me for multiple hitches. Not just searching through the internet, but quality is important, and that's a tip that I have for you guys. Whether you can save money and get things on Amazon, you really want to look for quality stuff in terms of your work gear and stuff you're bringing on board ship. James says the undedicated disloyalty, the reality of that from the millennials perspective is adaptability to corporate shifts. Again, this uncertainty, willingness to go from ship to ship. And I think this is an excellent quality for you guys. It's something that I love about your generation. Too many people in my generation spent their entire careers on one type of ship, and there are things you're not going to learn unless you're able to jump from ship to ship in different parts of the industry. Possibly even as James moves from him talking about the author of this presentation himself, he'd spent a lot of time on ships, and then he did some time in the office, and I think that's great. If you're a tanker guy and you could spend some time on container ships or gray hulls, that's an opportunity. It's going to broaden your knowledge, and I think it's great. Delayed development, James says that is selective in life decisions. I think that is a great quality. And unrealistic personal expectations versus ambition. And what he means by that, I think, is, you expect a lot from your job. You push a lot when you get on board ship. And that can often lead as, hey, I know you want to lead this fire team. I know you want to have this thing. I know you want to be left on the bridge alone, and you want to be able to prove yourself. But from my perspective as a captain, that can look to us as being unrealistic. James says the reality of that, the mindset of the millennials, the new third mate, is, hey, you guys are ambitious. He also talks about that you're training oriented, which I think is a wonderful quality. Sorry, I realized I was talking at the camera, but I had left the slide up. I apologize for that. So I'm just going to jump into what I think my advice is to the millennials. And if you guys have any questions, comments, if you have questions for me specifically, you're getting on a new ship, you have a friend who's on a new ship, and you want to ask a specific question, no matter how dumb, I think a question like, what do I bring aboard a ship, is a perfectly valid one. So any sorts of questions that you have, I hope to answer it in this Friday afternoon episode. And let me bring up the post so I can make sure I'm notified of these comments. Thomas Schmidt says, would be great to get a link to the presentation after your episode. Absolutely, I can do that, Thomas. It's James Spear, Spear. And if you just type his name in Nautical Institute, I think it comes up as the PowerPoint. It is on Google, but I will include a link afterwards. Nur says, Mariano means seafarers, mariners. Oh, our fellow mariners. Thank you for specifying. I thought it was a location yesterday. Jose says, hello from the Philippines. Hello, Jose. Amazing maritime culture. I've worked with many Filipino mariners working foreign flag for many years. You guys are professional, and I love, what we're missing in the United States is really a close-knit culture of the maritime community. We all working on ships have our friends who work on the, who all work in shipping. But the average guy, when we go down the street, when we're home, we're in our community, there aren't too many mariners around. What I love about working with guys from the Philippines is you guys have some close-knit community, some great training, and ability ships around the world. So please share within the Philippines. Love to have you guys, and I'm excited you're here with us. All right, so getting on, me as a ship captain, what is my advice to the new third mate from the millennial generation? And again, any questions specifically, put it in the comments and I'll answer it after it. All right. One thing that's important, and you have to realize what is the job of the captain and the chief mate, and what does it take to be hired as a captain and a chief mate. So you have to know, as you're approaching the job, who you're dealing with, who your bosses are, and what our perspective is, and how we got the job, why we were chosen for those positions. And there are a number of reasons. It's competency and knowledge. You obviously have to know a lot to be captain, and experience. But two things that pertain specifically to new third mates is confidence, right? The captain and the chief mate have the confidence of the company. What does confidence mean? It means doing what you say you're going to do. So when you go to interview as a captain, there are a lot of questions. Are you able to navigate this ship safely? Are you able to lead the crew? And our answers, if you're going to be hired from within the company, they have to inspire a degree of confidence. The company has to believe that you can do what you say you are going to do. Another big part of this, and where it really gets, going back to, so the captain and the chief mate, and I'll admit, there are some really, I wouldn't say bad captains, but captains that aren't the best leaders or don't connect very well with people. One reality of this industry, all right, and one thing that has changed dynamically over the years is, for many years, this was an industry of kind of loners. Introverts is the politically correct term now. And I'm not using this in a negative way. There's one of the best-selling books of last year is The Power of the Introvert, and it talks about the mindset of the people who are introverted. And in how I'm defining an introvert is there are two types of people, and how do you determine if you're an introvert or an extrovert? Are you a social or a more internal person? An introvert is someone They can speak in public. They can be very sociable. And it's very difficult in the modern age to determine who an introvert is. I am an introvert, even though I love talking with you guys, connecting, going to social conferences. And how do I know? An introvert specifically means that to recharge your batteries, how you feel complete, all right, is you need some alone time. So when I go to a conference, when I speak, when I talk, I can be on for hours. I can be a very sociable guy. I truly enjoy it. But if I don't get an hour to myself in the hotel room or eating alone or just having a coffee alone, that's how I recharge my batteries. Where a social extrovert is the exact opposite. Being alone too much of the time, if they're alone a lot, they recharge their batteries by going out, going to a social thing. So they feel recharged when they're in a social setting. Well, how does this relate to the generation gap? Guys of my generation predominantly are introverts, all right? We need that downtime in order to recharge ourselves. Where now, and you didn't get into this profession. You didn't go and say, I want to be a ship captain if you were not an introvert, because it was a very lonely job. So all of the extroverts decided, hey, well, I'm going to go landside or just sidestep the Maritime Academy altogether. This is changing now with the internet. You can be an extrovert and work on ships because there's all this connectivity. You can get on Twitter, you can get on Facebook, you can get on Skype and recharge your batteries in a social setting. So determine if you're an introvert or extrovert, but then realize that a lot of the people in my generation who are in the leaderships are introverts, and they have a different look on. They need some alone time. Being bothered continuously is a problem for introverts. And where I'm going back to, there aren't bad captains, but there are captains who, hey, they got into this profession so they didn't have to deal with a lot of people. That's just a fact I'm going to come out and say right now. So there are guys who aren't great at the social things in these leadership positions, and that's a problem. All right. But the captains were not hired for their social skills. What they were hired is instilling confidence in the ship owner and operator. And number two, what's very critical for a captain, one of the biggest things to get into that job as chief mate or captain, is you're hired for making choices. All right. I'm going to switch to the live view here because the close-up view, so that you guys know, I think this is a very important point. You have to make choices on a daily basis. You're constantly making choices. And this can be very frustrating to a new third mate because these choices are not necessarily the optimal choices. The millennials are now constantly in a state of being able to research on the internet, being able to look up the optimal solution for things. Going on Amazon and, there are hundreds of options and sorting through the reviews and picking the one thing that is optimal. Again, we looked at millennials are efficient, they're thrifty, and they like to make good choices. Well, in the operation of a ship, all right, more important than making the perfect choice is making a good choice. All right. So this is a major difference between my generation and the new millennial generation. Where does this come into play specifically? It comes into play, when you're shaking your head and you say, why is the captain doing this? Why is he sending me in this job? There's a better solution. I can do it a better way. That's one option. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But the other side of that coin, I know you want to prove yourself and I know you want to do a good job. But the other side of the coin is he's got to make a choice, and it doesn't mean that you're doing a bad job if he says no to something, all right? Or if he sends you to a job that is, not the greatest in your point. A lot of mates, young mates, I send them down to clean the bilge and they think it's punishment, or I send them out to inventory the lifeboat and then send them back the next day to do the same exact thing on the next lifeboat, and they see, hey, that's a punishment. He must really hate me. That internal talk is bad. It's going to get you in trouble in your job. Most than 99% of the time, I'd send someone to go down and clean the bilge, do that yucky job, or get into a brine tank, even an officer, is because the bilge needs to be cleaned. The brine tank needs to be cleaned. The lifeboats need to be inventoried. So you don't want to take these decisions personally. And I know there's maybe a better choice, but the captain has 100 things on his list of things that need to be done today. And he was hired because he makes a choice, not because he makes the best choice all the time, but because he gets stuff done. So it's very important to follow those directions and get the job done. Now, if you have a better way of doing things, if you see an opportunity to improve the operation, by all means, I don't want to discourage that. I want you to go in and that's a big part of my personality and why I launched gCaptain. I saw the news and you had to pay for the news and it had to show up in the mail and arrive late. That's why I joined gCaptain. But I want to give you a little tip on how you can implement these changes that you see. You guys are all really smart guys. The millennial generation is connected and has a lot of things that can offer us to really improve things around the ship. How do you institute those changes? How do you give the suggestions without being pesky? And the way that you need to do it is you got to do it the way you're told to do it. And the simplest way, even if it's not correct, the way has to be safe. If you see a huge safety violation, if you think someone's going to get hurt or the ship's going to be damaged, then please call out that issue and let the captain come up with an alternative way. I'm not trying to muzzle you here. What I'm trying to say is, if I tell you to do the lifeboat this way and take everything out of the lifeboat, arrange it on deck and inventory it, and you say, hey, this may be more efficient if I do it on the boat, think of those suggestions, write them down, and let that idea build. Work on that idea. First step to doing anything properly is do it the way. So from my perspective as Cap, I'm looking at you and I say, you are a go-getter. You're a smart individual. You don't have that much experience as a new third mate. Maybe your way is good and maybe your way isn't good. I, as a optimist, tend to think your idea may be better. It's not that we're dismissing your idea, okay? But I know my way works. I know it works. I've been doing it for 20 years. My way works. Your way may work better, but my way works. And that can come across to the new third mate as, hey, that guy's a real jerk. It's his way or the highway. That's not the case. What the case is we are hired as captains because we make choices, we make decisions, and we get things done. So this is what I'm asking. My suggestion to you is do it our way a couple times. It may be 2 times, it may be 4 times, while that idea percolates inside your head, while you can improve that idea, and then present it to us after you've done it our way a few times, all right? Don't jump to the new idea right away. Work on that idea, perfect it. Ask some people about it. You're great at social media, Twitter. You got an email. You can ask your friends. You can ask your professor, other guys on ships. Do a little research before presenting that idea. And even if the idea is great, try it the wrong way. All right, try it our way, and our way may be totally wrong, but you're going to learn something from it regardless. It'll get the job done. It'll give you opportunity to really move forward. All right, my next thing is what we need most from you as new third mates. All right, what we need most from you, bar none, is honesty. So I'm going to jump right to that. Okay, there needs to be honesty on the ship, and it's not something with your generation. It's something with every generation. My generation, your generation. When we make mistakes, we don't like to admit them. But on board a ship, you're talking about safety equipment. You're talking about people's lives, environmental damage, all these huge things. If you mess up something in a lifeboat, you go down and you accidentally knock off a wire on the engine, and you're like, man, will this start? Will it not start? We need to know about it. It was the only thing I really got frustrated with as a captain, and it happened to people in my generation as well. I get frustrated with them is if there is something safety critical, you messed up, that is okay. We are all human here. We all make mistakes. The captain will make a half dozen mistakes a day. We all make mistakes. That's okay. But what the captain needs is information. You made a mistake. Tell me about it. All right. You may get in trouble for it, but in the end, you're going to be respected. But this is not only important, it's safety critical. It's critical for your safety, my safety, and the safety of the ship. And again, you don't have to tell us everything you did. If you missed a checklist or you accidentally did something small, no. But when you get that gut feeling, hey, this is a big problem and I screwed up, come and talk about it with your bosses. The next thing is really, we need confidence in you. Okay, you want to be left on the bridge alone. You want to be in charge of a fire team during drills. You want to be trusted to do the inventory on the lifeboat. Guess what? Here's a little secret from my perspective. There is nothing the captain wants more than to be able to sleep and leave you alone on the bridge in the middle of the night. To let you do the lifeboats knowing full well they're going to be done correctly. To let you take a couple ABs and go do a tank inspection. This is what we live for. This is the end result. We want you to succeed. And you have to remember that. When we pull you from a job, if we come up and watch over your shoulder while you're on a bridge, it's not because we don't want you to fail. We don't want you to succeed. It's not that you're not capable of succeeding. All right. It's that we need a little more confidence in you. So what is confidence? I want to talk about that for a second. What does it mean when I have confidence in you? Confidence simply means I know you're going to do what you say you're going to do. All right. So if you say you're going to be okay up on the bridge alone, I need to trust that you are assessing the situation correct. So let's talk a little bit about false confidence. All right, there are all these books saying, hey, all that you need is confidence and an internal, ability to push through things. This isn't confidence. True confidence, what confidence that ship captains have is not that. I've read a definition of confidence saying it's the ability to handle any situation. And I think that is 100% false. Right? The one thing a captain knows, and the one thing any intelligent person knows, and especially people who know a lot, is how little information you know in the world. There's an old joke that's passed around countless times through ship captains. And it tells a story. I'm going to tell it from my perspective, just to be able to story tell. But as a new third mate, I had graduated from SUNY Maritime College. I had crossed the Atlantic Ocean 6 times. I'd spent 4 years studying on board ships. All right, I I had interned, I had talked to people, I had read all the books, and I knew everything, just about everything there was to do with shipping. And then I got promoted to second mate. Right? Now I have to take a backside of the moon and do the celestial and some of the administration. So maybe there's 5% of things that I don't know, but still 95% of things on board ships. It's a small shipping world. This is just my ship. I know 95% of it. Then I got promoted to chief mate. Chief mate. Now, when I looked at my career path and going up to chief mate, I said, oh man, that chief mate, he's got the world of knowledge. He knows all the deck and the cargo and the lines and how to navigate the ship. Well, that's your job. Of course, you're tested. You wouldn't be out there if the Coast Guard if you didn't know that already. But what I didn't know about the chief mate is, oh man, now my AB, why isn't he working? Oh, he's got alimony payments, and his wife found out about it, his girlfriend, and his son's sick. And this guy is trying to study to be a mate, and he's losing sleep because he's having trouble with the exam. And there are all of these personnel issues. That's your job as chief mate, is handling the personnel issues of the deck crew, getting those guys on target and motivated. And you got all this coming from the captain, his desires, but you don't have any authority to override his. It's a very difficult job on the ship. So, third mate, I'm getting off my story. Third mate, knew everything. Second mate, knew 95% of it. Chief mate, became chief mate. I quickly realized I didn't know squat. All right. The things that are important, the motivating people, getting them to work, getting their mind on task, I knew nothing about. And then I got promoted to captain, and the chief engineer comes to my office and he goes, Cap, you just got promoted and you have to take this ship across the Indian Ocean. Are you ready for this? Are you prepared? Do you know everything that's required to know to get this ship safely to harbor? And honestly, I looked at the chief engineer and I said, in the whole ocean of knowledge of shipping, I got this bucket. I got very little I know. I don't know about the customs declarations and the insurance waivers and the risks of war and the office thing and dealing with all this. I just have a bucket of knowledge. And the chief engineer looks at me and he says, John, that's scary. You telling me you only have a little bucket of shipping knowledge and you're going to get this ship across the Indian Ocean safely? That scares the hell out of me. And I said, Chief, it scares me a little bit too, but you know what? We're going to be okay, because 2 doors down from my office is the brand new third mate, and that guy knows everything. Just ask him. He'll tell you. He knows it all. So you have to realize the captain doesn't know everything. What the captain knows is how to instill confidence, establish a track record in the industry, and making good choices. He may not know the best, most effective. If you're the guy in the lifeboat every day inspecting it, I guarantee you're going to come up with better ways to do it than the captain. All I ask is, hey, don't take it personal when we push you off and say no to something. And if you got a new idea, really think it over, give it some time, try it our way a few times before you go ahead and do it, and instill confidence. If we're taking you off the bridge, if we're not giving you the jobs if we're not giving you the responsibilities, no, we want to leave you alone on the bridge. But all we need from you, we know you know your job. We know you passed the license exams. We know that you've been on the cadetship. We know all this. You don't have to tell us your whole story. And don't try to defend yourself in asking for this. All we need from you, the only thing we need, is confidence that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Big part of that is calling the captain. Every captain says it. If in the middle of the night you're unsure about anything, call the captain. Right? No one wants to call the captain. I know it, but every ship I got into within the first couple nights, I'd find an opportunity, just a little questioning, call the captain. That instills confidence. The captain says, are you going to call me? You said, yes, I will. and then a couple weeks go by and you haven't woken the captain up in the middle of the night, does that gain confidence or lose confidence? Now, if you're calling the captain every night for the first 2 weeks, you're gonna get a ticket off really quick. I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you told the captain when you're unsure of something, you're gonna call him. We know it within 2 weeks there's gonna be something you're unsure of. Have you called him? All right. Writing down. This is critical. All right. When the captain asks you to do something, you need to have a pen and paper. All right. It can be the iPhone if it's intrinsically safe and it's allowed. My generation responds better if you got a pen and paper and then you go and enter it in your iPhone later. But write it down and make sure you cross it off. It can be something small. Hey, mate, you made the coffee. I like it a little darker. Can you make it darker next time? And you say, yeah, Cap, I can. Well, write it down because we're all people. We're going to forget. And it can be something as small as that. I asked him 6 times to make the coffee darker and he forgot. And you're thinking, that's not important. You're right. The coffee is not important. What's important is that you do what you say you're going to do so that we have confidence in you. And captains are very good at testing new mates. All right. We're very good in the small things, the big things. What we want to know is, are you doing what you say you're going to do? All right. So if we tell you, hey, I want you to launch the lifeboat. Can you take a couple of ABs and launch the lifeboat? Maybe you've been on a few months and we give you an important job like that. And you say, yeah, and I want to try this new way of launching. And we say, okay, give it a shot. Well, if you're not confident in yourself, don't say you're going to do it. That's a big part. All right. Captains get the job because they do what they say they're going to do with the company. A big part of that is, as captain, we don't say we're going to do things that we cannot accomplish because we lose confidence in you and we lose confidence. The company would lose confidence in us and we lose confidence in ourselves. So a lot of times when you're continually asking, hey, Cap, when will you put me in charge of a fire team? When will you? When will you? And you want a direct answer. Well, if I said, hey, Joe, I think you're going to be ready next week. And I'd like to put you in on Sunday, but I'm not sure about it yet in my head because I'm not sure if I have the confidence in you, but I tell you I'm going to put you in charge. And then I'm really not sure on Sunday and I pull you from that position. It's going to be a confidence issue. So it's not that captains don't want to make promises, but a big part of gaining confidence is not to promise things you're not sure you can do or not. All right? It's okay to say, I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to attempt it. Let me think of a better way and try to implement it. But that's a big thing with confidence. Confidence is not saying being on the top of the ski lift, a triple diamond and saying, I got confidence I can do this, and just pushing off without the knowledge of that, without the experience of doing a double diamond first. So confidence is a big part of this. Take notes religiously. All right. Any questions go through your head, take notes. All our minds are like sieves. If we don't have it down on paper, it's not going to stick the first time. And to instill confidence, when someone gives you an order, it needs to stick. The best way to write it down and then cross it off when it's done. Notes are also a good reference and something you can go back to. And another key to success is when the captain tells you to do something. Have you ever been in a restaurant? All right. And the waitress is kind of, you have an order. You say, oh, I want the Waldorf salad and hold the walnuts because I'm allergic. And can you put a little cheese on that? And she goes, yep. All right. Do you feel confident in her ability to get that order right? No, and it's got nothing to do with her. It's got to do with your experience with other people who have nothing to do with her. And she may have, a lot of waitresses are able to put large orders in their head, she may have 100% effectiveness rate in remembering those orders. It doesn't matter. I don't know her. I'm meeting her for the first time. But if a waitress, whether she has a razor memory or not, I give her an order and she's writing it down, I know it's going to be correct. So whether you think you can memorize or not memorize, when we tell you to do something, write it down. That just, us seeing the pen moving in the right direction is a huge step for you gaining our confidence. All right. Keep your stories short. All right. Oh, well, I want to go back to a social. It's important to be social. All right. I know a lot's going on Facebook and Twitter and your friends are there and everything else, but the social aspect of shipping is important. The crewmates are like family. You have to know about them. You have to know who they are and what makes them tick. The biggest mistake you can make is coming on board ship and thinking you know everything and not realizing no matter how much you do know, you could be a maritime expert. You could know everything, aced all your Coast Guard exams. You don't know that ship. You don't know the company procedures and how it works, and you don't know, most importantly, the people. Is this guy a little guarded? Can he be a jerk at times? What drives him? Which guys can I rely on for what tasks? Knowing those people. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and being able to know what someone's weaknesses is a huge part of the shipping experience. What you have to realize is ships are completely undermanned. All right, the 24 people on board 1,000-foot tankers is not enough. It's not enough to get the job done. All right, so there are always tasks that are going to not be completed. There are always going to be problems where you got to reach out and you got to rely on other people to do things right. And if you're relying on someone who's, say, dyslexic to be filling out the logbook, that's not going to work out very well, or doing an inventory. And you have to know your own weaknesses too, so you can get help in those specific areas. And how you do that is being social, not locking yourself in the cabin. It doesn't have to be long, but if there's a movie going on in the crew mess or just in break room, spend some time. Tell some stories, the sea stories. Listen to someone's, troubles with their wife or at home, or they talk about their kid's soccer game, because you're going to learn a lot about their personality, what makes that person tick by just being social. It doesn't have to be all night. I'm an introvert. I like to lock my cabin and have an hour off to myself, but you need to get out there and just talk with the crew to learn how they tick. Now, how do you kind of jump into that break room scenario? All right, you're in there, you got all these mariners who are experienced, they're telling stories, they're funny, and then I've seen it 100 times, the third mate jumps in there, oh, I got a story too. And he tells his story and the room just goes flat. Well, what you have to experience is whatever your story is on the training ship isn't going to be as good as one of my stories from the last 20, 30 years of shipping. And it's not that you're bad at stories, and it's not that whatever. The simple fact is, this profession, if you continue in shipping for many years, you are going to have some damn great stories. All right? You're going to have stories you can walk into a room. You can go to your church or your kids' thing, and you can stop the room with your stories. You're going to have some great stories in this industry because it's dangerous and dynamic, and you're out on your own, and it's self-sufficient, and it's all the things that make up a great story. Those guys in the room, it's not that your stories are bad. It's just that those guys have some great stories. Anyone who's been doing this for a number of years has some great stories. And we want to hear from you, okay? But what we're constantly thinking is, hey, that's almost as good as my story. And it may sound arrogant from my perspective, but we want your contribution, but no one wants to be bored or think. So the bottom line is share your stories, but please, please Keep them short. And I'm not just talking to you. I'm talking to somebody. We all know a captain or chief mate or chief engineer who's got a great story, but he pushes it on for half an hour. All right. If you look at the great comedians or a comic strip writer can write an amazing, funny, complete, emotionally provocative story in just 6 little things on a newspaper. All right. The power of a great story is a short story. Take that advice as I continue to ramble on here. All right. Some more things here. Systemize your faults. That's another piece of advice here. What does it mean to systemize your faults as a mate? All right. There are things you're going to do wrong, and you're going to do wrong repeatedly. Right? It's just human nature. It's just how we do, and it's going to frustrate your coworkers almost as much as it's going to frustrate yourself. Right? So I'm trying to think of an example here, but there was always one tank. When I worked product tankers, we had manual gaugings before. You had to read out in a cargo control room. We had to actually go down with the tape and gauge it and put it on chalkboard. And there was always one tank I missed. It was kind of tucked away. And man, continually missed this tank. Well, right next to it was this big crane stanchion that was bright yellow. Instead of thinking and beating myself up over that tank, I'd say, hey, whenever I see that yellow big thing, remember, did I see the tank? Right? When you're on the bridge, if you have a tendency to forget the radar or to call you, find something that's going to clue you in to that. All right. If you're coming into a port and every time you forget the port, you forget to call VTS. What I'm saying is look for these patterns and look for systems that are going to enable you to beat those patterns. With that VTS, maybe it's in the voyage plan, you have to put it in big letters, call VTS. Find those patterns in your faults and systemize a solution to fix them. All right, one of the biggest things, and this is not just advice to new third mates, this is advice to everyone out there who does a watching position. The most important thing that you're going to do to keep yourself safe at sea and your ship safe and do an effective job is to shut up and listen to that voice in the back of your head. And this is another systemized thing that I learned, right? I started writing down my faults in a book. Every time I made a mistake, I'd write it down. I'd say, hey, what does these have in common? And every time I had this weird feeling in the back of my head. And it's hard to express that to a new third mate because it sounds a lot like magic or focus or something else. That's not what it is. Your brain, they say Einstein only used, 10% of his brain and that the other 90% was useless. That is a myth. It is false. All right. What it is Einstein only had conscious ability to reach in and control 10% of his brain. So he could only think with 10% of his brain. But the other 90% is doing everything automatically. I can clap my hands behind my head. I can write my name without looking at it. These are all things. I can drive a car. You know how complicated driving a car is? I'm not thinking about it. That's all the stuff that's going down in that 90% of your brain, in the amygdala and the, outside of the prefrontal cortex where your decision is. So what you need to realize is that 90%, kind of the iguana brain, some people call it, isn't very good at communicating with the upper. It's like a big dumb warehouse with all this information, but it can't speak slowly, all right? How it notifies you of a problem. It's a lot quicker and a lot smarter than your 10% brain. You just can't communicate very well. It just goes, something's wrong. I had this one captain who we were approaching rocks, all right? And we didn't realize we were off course and we were going towards the land. And he comes up, on the bridge, he walks in, he goes, something's wrong. And I say, hey, Cap, can we fix it? Well, he goes, just something's wrong. I don't know what it is. Go find it. You're doing something wrong. And I thought he was testing me. I thought it was a test like, he knows what's wrong. And he doesn't want to tell me. He wants to see how I react. Well, no, we were heading too close to the reef, and it turns out just the current going up on the reef and coming back, the way the ship was moving, it just felt off from him. He didn't know there were rocks. He didn't know why he was getting this feeling. It was that lower 90% saying, hey, this movement is off. There's something wrong. Something's dangerous here. And what we tend to do, especially when we're new third mates, is we tend to either overanalyze it. Well, I got this weird feeling. Well, it must be nothing. I'm new, and just have this internal monologue where you got 10 voices talking. In order to access that lower 90%, you really have to take a moment to be quiet and just shut your brain down. All right? You still may not get the answer. What you need to do then is ask for help or be proactive. Go find out more information. But I won't go into all the tips there, but that's important. Listen to that voice in the back of your head. It could save your life. All right, what else do we have? There's so many tips for you guys, and I wish I could share them all. I'm going to go through a few more, and then I got to get going. It is Friday afternoon. All right, you know what you know about maritime. All right, a lot of times new third mates come on, and I know all this information, and I know this stuff, and they want to prove it to us. All right? What we realize as captains, chief mates, that you have a good knowledge, some better than others, and we're going to assess that, and we're going to find out how much you do know. But what you don't know is the ship, the people, and the procedures. And I talked about that before. So what you need to do is when you get on the ship, don't try to learn more about the basic maritime stuff. You need to spend your initial days focusing on this ship. Take tours of the ship in your off time. Get down in the coffee room and talk to the people. Learn the procedures. Figure out what those things are that you don't know anything about and learn those first before you go back and study the book and the Merchant Seaman's Manual and trying to figure out the stuff you already know pretty well. If you're having a problem, it's probably because you don't know that specific ship. You don't know the specific people who are trying to help you. You don't know the specific procedures that ship uses. All right? You know what you know coming on the ship. Your job, what you specifically need to learn, is that ship, those people, and that ship's procedures. All right? So those are the things you want to focus on. And again, whenever we get to a new ship, first couple nights, I'd spend just touring the ship in my off time, learning everything. Where's the layout? Where are things? That's important stuff. All right, say yes more often. If the captain asks you to do a bilge, don't get so much in your head. Don't overanalyze that. Is that because he doesn't like me? Is he trying to punish me? 9 times out of 10. So some captains do it as punishment. But if they're trying to do it to punish you, they're probably just jerks, and they're doing the same thing to the chief mate and the second mate. So don't take it personally. Just say yes and get the job done. If he's asking you to clean out that nasty bill, it's probably not a punishment. It's probably because it needs to be cleaned for whatever reason. All right. Read in your off time. Continue your knowledge. Your generation is great at that already. Ask better questions. All right. So you should continuously be asking questions. That's how you gain knowledge in this industry. That's how you advance. But you really need to spend time, and I do too. I'm constantly reading books about asking better questions. Be curious, but ask better questions. Sometimes the questions have to be more specific. If you're not getting the answers that you're looking for, if the answers aren't helpful, it's probably asking the wrong question. So really think about the questions you're going to ask. Ask more questions, but ask better questions. Questions that are specific. Questions that are specific to the ship. If you're asking a question and the captain or chief mate looks confused, don't back off of it. He probably has the answer, but he doesn't have that question in the right context because you didn't form the question right. There are books and studies and internet sites devoted to how to ask a better question. Entire lines of profession like detectives, they do a lot of training just asking better questions. journalists, and this is how I learned it. Being a journalist is all about asking better questions. I'm not going to give you the tips or define what a good question is, but no matter who you are or how good you think you're asking questions, there's always room for improvement in asking better questions. Don't multitask as much, right? Your generation is the iPhone and the iPad and the everything else, right? Shipping is slow, it's deliberate, all right? And in critical things, you may have an app for that can help with the charting and the everything else. But is that going to take you away from just plotting the chart line? A lot of people, captains, get frustrated with this. Millennial, there's an app for anything. It's not that we're against apps. But the fact that there is some value to staying on point, using the tools in front of you. So beware of the multitasking. It can really hurt you on board ship. And this is something I have to, as much as I love gadgets, and I got 6 iPhones now connecting this, and I'm switching between these on another iPad. I mean, I love multitasking, but I'm a believer in doing one thing at a time. So be careful of multitasking. Don't overwork, all right? A lot of third mates are eager, and they work 12 hours, and then they're like, bam, I'm going to work another 2 hours to prove how good I am. Well, that's not a good idea. Instead, use those 2 hours to learn what you need about the ship by doing tours and going to other departments, going in the engine room and learning about the people and the procedures specific to that ship. Don't work longer just on deck to prove a point. If you really want to do better, you have to use that time to really study and learn and observe the ship itself. And my final tip here before I get into questions and comments is sleep. Sleep, guys. All right. Part of the problem with the modern age is Facebook's always on, Twitter's always on. My last couple years as captain and chief mate, we'd always have these cases. These guys were always, would be a certain individual. He was always showing up late for work. He looked tired throughout the day. He was a safety risk. I'd say, hey, I'd try to mentor him and everything. And then I get to him and I go, you got to throw away the video game console. All right, you got to get it out of the room. And how do you know I play video games? Because you're losing sleep. And then for some people, it's video games. For some people, it's Facebook. Some people, it's Twitter. Sleep is at a premium in our industry. If you look tired all day, you're doing something wrong. That wrong thing is probably spending too much of your off time on internet, social media, games, whatever it is, watching movies. In my generation, there were people just like that. They were reading books too often and watching DVDs. So it doesn't matter what the vice is. But even a lot of times we self-justify that. Well, I didn't get much sleep last night, but I was studying the rules of the road. Sleep is more important. Oh, I wanted to work a few extra hours to help someone else. Sleep is most important. We cannot have confidence in you as a captain unless you're well rested and show up for work on time with a good attitude, because this is dangerous stuff we're going, guys. So sleep, sleep, sleep. I'm not talking 20 hours of sleep. Don't sleep during your watch and everything else. When you're off time, make sure you're getting at least 6, preferably 8 hours. I know that's impossible in today's, but 6 hours is doable on the ship. And make sure your schedule, especially if you're in a split sleeping or you're working 6 and 6, it can be difficult. How you get more sleep, the tip to getting more sleep is make it the most important thing in your job. Everything else should revolve around you getting sleep. All right. Whew, that was a lot. I hope I had some good advice to you guys. I hope I was able to connect on some level. If there were some good things, please give a thumbs up here. I love the feedback. If you completely disagree with me, write a comment. I really want to help the younger generation. You're the future of shipping, and you have some excellent ideas and new ways to look at it that I'm really excited about, and I think other captains are too. There are very few captains who I talk with who said, "Oh, this generation's horrible, and I don't want to deal with them." There are a couple guys like that. You got to realize when you get on a ship, not everyone's going to like you. And the reasons, maybe it was advice my dad gave me once. And I remember my first really difficult captain. And no matter how much I worked or hard, he was always on my case. And the fact, it wasn't that he was a bad captain or I was a bad mate. Some people just don't get along well. So don't take things very as personal. Just work on what you can work on. All right, let's see what some of the questions are. Christopher says, greetings from Boston. I am a U.S. Coast Guard veteran and a BM3. I haven't been out for 10 years and I've been considered going back to sea in the Merchant Marine. What are your thoughts about taking the hawse pipe route to third mate in the current maritime industry? I think it's an excellent idea, Christopher. I think you have a great background of knowledge in the Coast Guard. Coast Guard's a wonderful opportunity, and I think you're going to bring a lot to the ship, especially on the safety and the rescue at sea. This is a critical thing about ships. I like ships with diversity of experience. One of my favorite ABs of all time, he was brand new AB. He used to be a crane operator, but that guy knew rigging, he knew ropes, he knew equipment. He was always helping us. All of my ABs knew the AB stuff. They all knew how to inspect a lifeboat and stand a bridge watch. They didn't know all this rigging and the ropes and the lines and the safe working load. And this guy, what really stood him apart is he was always trying to learn the maritime stuff from us, and he was teaching all the stuff that we didn't know as mariners to us. So it was a win-win situation. The Coast Guard's giving a great experience. I love that. Especially the biggest obstacle to being a third mate now is all the new training and regulations you have, the training you need to do to become a third mate. If you can get that with the GI Bill, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And I don't think it's too old. I don't care if you're 50, possibly 60, and you want to go out to sea, as long as you have the willingness to work hard, because there is no getting around hard work in this industry. Ships are undermanned, and you're going to be away for long periods of time. So if you want a relaxing retirement, this is not it. But if you want to work, you want to get out to sea, you're eager to learn, absolutely. I think it's a good idea, Christopher. Just a quick comment. Work with the Canadian Coast Guard, and one of the best things I learned as a new chief officer was to learn from the bosun. With us, they have generally been on the ship for a while and know the programs and crew and are a wealth of knowledge. All right, guys. Yes, excellent. Work with the bosun. All right, but I'm going to tell you, that's going to be the challenging thing. If the bosuns have many talents, all right, one of the bosun's best talents, and I don't know if they teach it at Piney Point or something else, is to make the third mate look like he's useless. Make him think that he's useless. Bosuns are rough guys, all right? But it's not that they don't think much of you. If you ask the bosun for help and he's gruffy or gives you a hard time, he's looking at it from a different perspective. But once you can win over the bosun, once you learn these tips that I told you, working with captains and chief mates, once you respect him and respect his knowledge and try it his way a few times, once you win over the bosun, the rest of your job is simple. You have all the resources and information that you could possibly win. If that's the checkmate move at your new third mate. That's the one that is really tough to pull off, all right? It's easier to kind of deal with the officers and the ABs and ignore the bosun and follow my tips. You'll do all right. But if you want things to go smoothly from day one, and I don't have the answers exactly how to win the bosun. If it was an easy job, everyone would do it. The bosuns are excellent at kind of feigning apathy towards the third mate and giving him a hard time, but that's what makes it valuable. All right, so if you can win over the bosun, absolutely go for it, and it's worth a try anyway. they knowing the bosun is they're get it done guys who are tough and not over intellectual and don't care about the most efficient way in the doing thing. They care about the old school way, the knowledge, and they want to see that you are willing to buy into their system before they buy into you. So it may seem, hey, we got a new app and new this, and he goes, well, splice these lines for me and do it without your app. If you can do it kind of the traditional way, if you can get your hands dirty. As a scholar guy, I always had an easy time with the bosun, because if the bosun was down cleaning the bilge with the guys, I'd say, hey, Bose, can I join you? And a lot of times, I'd call the bosun on my first ships and say, hey, Bose, I heard you're doing the lifeboats. Can I help you out? Can I just learn something with your ABs? And he'd say, get lost, get lost. And then there would always come a point where I'd call the bosun and I'd say, I remember on one ship, my first drill ship I was on, constantly every morning I'd call the bosun and say, hey, Bose, can I join you guys, just for an hour, hang out with the crew, do some deck work. I was a dynamic positioning officer, a computer guy, and he'd say, no, get lost, go back to your computers. And then one day I called him and he goes, I am cleaning out the bilge and the poo tanks, the sewage tanks went into the bilge, and they're all stuff floating in there, and it's nasty, John. Hey, if you want to come down to help out. And I was so eager to get away from the computer and get out of the DP room. I said, I'm down there, bosun. I went down there, and from that day on, man, the bosun was my best ally. Being willing to volunteer for those hard jobs. And it's not, I used to think it was my hard work that went over the bosun and my willingness to get in there and get it dirty. No, it's not that. It's you form a bond with a crew when you're doing a truly miserable job, when you're out there off the coast of Alaska with baseball bats, beating the ice off of the deck of the tanker for hours and losing sleeps and tripping. That's how you form those good bonds. Cleaning out bilges at the sewage tank thing with the bosun or engineer, those hard experiences are what really wins it over. It has nothing to do with your willingness to work, your experience. It's having each other's back. That's what the bosun's looking for. Where do you draw the line between work and sleep, though? Jack Robinson says, gets very boring very quick being stuck. Oh, sorry, I lost it. Gets very boring very quick being stuck in a metal box where all you do is sleep and work. Absolutely. All right. This job teaches you one thing, and one thing more than ever. It's being okay with boredom. It's okay to be bored, Jack. And that's something that takes years to learn in ships. And one of the disconnect, I think, between the millennials and the new generation is when I was a kid in the Bronx, in City Island in 1979, 80, you think these stories are funny, or you think that my parents had no money. If we wanted a baseball, we had to go find one, and it was chewed up by the dog. And, we didn't have iPads or iPhones and television. My parents used to turn off the TV just to save money. I could watch Sesame Street early in the morning, but once the day was going, all lights and power, and I couldn't open I remember I wasn't able to open the fridge during the middle of the day because my dad's day. We don't have the money to replace the energy in that fridge. I mean, we had no money, and I was in the Bronx, and what you learn is it's okay. It's okay to be bored, all right? What you have to do is that's an opportunity. Some people call it boredom, and some people call it meditation, and once you get past that boredom stage, you really have an unencumbered feeling. I'll tell you, the thing I like most about this industry, what I love, when I look back at my years spent at sea, what I'm proudest of, what I miss the most is you can go out on a ship, leave the harbor, enter the middle of the ocean, and there could be a meteoroid or the ice caps could melt in an hour, and the entire continent of North America could sink under the ocean. Everyone could die, and you'd be okay. That's confidence, all right? I have a good friend, one of the smartest individual I know. He's a big prepper, and I'm a prepper too, kind of this rice under the, in your basement type of thing. I got rice under my basement. I'm not afraid to main it. I got duct tape. I have all the survival equipment, tents, and I'm a prepper, all right? But the reason I'm a prepper is because I was a Boy Scout, and I think that term has been kind of bullied a little bit. I like to prepare. I like to be prepared for things. Do I think the Chinese are going to attack and there's going to be a financial crisis? No. I have no idea what's going to happen or what. But if something does happen, I like to be prepared. This friend takes it to the next level. I'm very intelligent. And the difference is I prep and there's no anxiety inside me. I don't prep because I'm scared. He preps a lot. There's a lot of anxiety. He goes, what if this happens? What if, there's a riot in the streets after Trump wins, or if Hillary won, or, what if China attacks or terrorists? What am I going to do? He's anxious because he doesn't have confidence in his own ability to solve the situation. I prep, but there's no anxiety in me because I got a sailboat, 40-foot sailboat, and I got the rice and stuff. I'll head out to sea. I'll just be fine. I know I'll be fine because I'm prepared. So live with boredom is my answer, Jack, and understand that once you get past the boredom and really, I would love nothing more in the middle of the night. I used to love the 12 to 4 watch and just sit on there, put on a little Pink Floyd and stare out the window and learn to enjoy a little bit of the boredom and socially interact with the crew. Some of those guys are weird, all right? I know you'll hear some crazy conspiracy theories, and some guys will be strange, and some guys will be poor, and some guys will be Hispanic and black and white and from different parts of the country or different nationalities, man. Get interested in them. Get interested in the ship. And there's so many interesting things out there that you shouldn't get bored. But when you do get bored, take that as a moment of meditation and relaxing. And if you have time to be bored on the ship, that's a good thing. You're on a great ship that gives you that opportunity because a lot are working a lot more than the STCW hours allow. I hope that answered it. If you want me something more specific, please send it in. I can refresh that. I think it's a great question. Because I think a lot of people, and it's a big problem with society, don't know how to deal with boredom. And ship is a boring place, especially the long transatlantic, trans-Pacific runs. So, and you asked specifically, where do you draw the line between work and sleep? Again, sleep's got to be your top priority. Everything has to revolve around the sleep. You have to get your job done or you're going to be fired. But in order to get your job done, sleep has to come. You have to make it your priority. If it's not number one priority, even if it's just 2 or 3, you're going to fail. All right? There's no room for sleepiness and tiredness in this job. And it's, once you get a little sleepy, it's hard to get the next sleep. And you just go, it's a snowball effect. So. Alex says, talk about on my last ship, we did it this way kind of guy. No one likes that guy, Alex. There's always a guy who goes, on the training ship, on this ship, we did it this way, and you guys are all full of it. I brought that up earlier, the way to learn something. How did I learn to do this video? All right? I know nothing about video production. And we got 10,000 people who looked at the last video and all these comments and likes, and I know nothing about it. And I got crazy ideas. I want to set up my DSLR. I got great cameras, some pro-grade video cameras and HDMI switchers, and I got some equipment. I wanted to do some cool things with, I was thinking my projector back and HD TV. No, I copied someone else. There are a couple friends. Lazo Friedman is kind of a workout specialist, good friend of mine from London. I watched his and I copied him exactly for the first couple episodes. And now as we move on, I'm going to start to add some lights and do it my own way. But it's important the first couple times you do it the ship's way. You do it their way. You learn their way and then improve. All right? Because they may surprise you. So it's okay to say on my last ship, or I learned it this way, but not until you've mastered that ship's way to do it. You know, one thing that's very important with conversation, you're always learning more if you're listening than talking. Right? My biggest complaint, I told my wife yesterday, Cindy, I said I have to watch these shows after I do it to make sure the audio is good and I look good and I didn't say anything wrong. So I have to sit at home and watch these shows. And Cindy goes, oh, she loves the show, and she's a mariner too. And I said, I personally only have one problem with the show. I don't particularly like watching my show, and it's not because I have a problem with my looks or my delivery or my anything else. I said, this guy right here on the TV, he never tells me anything I don't know already. I never have a wow moment when I'm watching John Konrad on the TV. And the same thing goes for your conversations or working something. Hey, your way may be better. But again, the captain was not hired to do it, the ship, the things in the most effective way. He was hired for getting things done and making decisions and confidence. And he'd rather a slow way that works 100% of the time than a fast way that may or may not work. All right, so we want the fast way, but don't go on and on about your last ship, the training ship. Sit down and learn it that ship's way, all right? And then you can intelligently bring up, you'll have time to formulate your opinion and why you think your way's better, and you'll have learned exactly how, more about their way of doing things. Don't be the guy who the first time you see something, he tries something new. That does not work well in this industry. And thank you, is it Alex, for bringing that up? Roland says, nice topic, Cam John. Millennial. Issue today is really important thing that needs to be considered while aboard. Yes. Okay, and I want to preface one of my best friends since starting this podcast, one of the guys, when I wrote the book, I was invited to a writers group in Los Angeles, and I go down once a month, and I was surrounded by best-selling authors, Robert Greene, Tucker Max, Neil Strauss. The list goes on and on and on of these guys that are in their writers group, and I was a member of them, and one of my favorite, best friends from that writers group's a guy named Ryan Holiday. He just came out with a book on Stoic philosophy. It sounds boring. His last book was Ego is the Enemy. These philosophical terms, and this is great advice. I don't know if you've read any of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. That's a great book for before you become a captain to learn. These are old books, and Ryan's a millennial, and he looks at the Stoic philosophy. But you're looking at philosophy and you're saying, John, that is boring. Right? It's boring because it's told by college professors who talk in academic speak. But the cores of these philosophies, especially the Stoics, is exciting and interesting stuff if they're brought from a new perspective. And the basis of it is things change, the internet changes, everything else, but people don't change. These are the problems we've been having. Your generation is millennial. You're a person, I'm a person. It's just a matter of perspective. We all come at this. So the bottom line here is, guys, I respect your generation, and I respect all the generations. And I've been there. I've banged my head against the old captains who are stuck in their ways. But it's harder to change your ways when you get older. And the important thing, I think, for all of us is to accept the millennials and accept the generation X and Ys and all these guys. We're happy to have you guys on board, and you bring something to the table. Matthias says, "Hi, John. Can you give me some advice as a deck cadet going on 6-month voyage? Thanks." Matthias, I think all of these tips work out with the deck cadet as well as the officer. You're in a little different position. It's often a lot easier for my generation to connect with the cadet than it is the third mate. The third mate is a lot more difficult a job because we don't have any expectations for the cadet. We don't expect them, and we can often put them in positions and let them try things that we can't let the third mate do because the third mate has his own job to do. There aren't enough people on the ship, guys. And as third mate, you may have this great idea, new way. Hey, if we paint I remember as third mate, I had an idea of Solus tape. All right, this was before self-righting lifeboats. It was an old lifeboat. I said, why didn't anyone put the damn Solus tape underneath the keel? And I went and I did all the Solus tape under the keel, and I got in a lot of trouble for wasting time doing it. And I still think today that I was right. And it turns out I found regulations. It's required on the keel of lifeboats. But I got in big trouble, and I didn't get in trouble because it was a bad idea. I didn't get in trouble because it was lacking initiative. I got in trouble because I was behind on some of my other work. And there's no way to do all these extra things. There just simply aren't enough people on board modern ships. We need more people, all right? There have to be at least 2 third mates. I believe it. A lot of people believe it. These ships are undermanned. It's nothing against you or your work ethic when you come up with these great plans and want to take initiative and do more. But the job, there are too many jobs for anyone, me included, and that's a big problem there. A cadet doesn't have that problem. He's a lot more of an extra. And my advice to you on top of this stuff as a cadet is get out there and see the operations, right? Anything unusual happening, cargo operations, bunkering operations. If you're on say a container ship and you're bringing on bunkers, it's very easy for the cadet to say, hey, man, that's an engineer thing. Or it may feel uncomfortable. Hey, I don't know if I'm okay with the engineers. The ship's one big family. You need to be comfortable with the engineers and the stewards and the cooks. We're one big family, guys. You need to communicate with those guys. And as cadet, if you can observe a bunkering operation, man, that's a big leg up if you end up on a tanker or you end up on a ship and the chief and the engineers are busy, you have a mechanical problem. So anything unusual, anchoring ops, line handling ops, get in the position where you're going to learn the most information. Get your sleep, As cadet, you can lose sleep because it's less of a safety critical. It's more important for the mates because they have to stand and watch. If the cadet, it's going to be really bad if you fall asleep in the middle of the night on watch, but the ship isn't going to crash. So you can push yourself a little more, and I'd say push yourself as cadet to see those unusual things, whether it's picking up a pilot or dropping an anchor. That's my advice for you. Take notes and really be present in your observations. Ask a lot of questions and ask better questions. All right, man, we got just a whole bunch of questions. Maybe I can answer 1 or 2 more. I remember sailing with bosuns with more than 40 years of experience. It is a really tough job for the chief mate to win the bosun. It's a tough job for anyone to win the bosun, and that's what a lot of third mates get discouraged. Oh, that bosun doesn't like me. That's kind of his job, guys, or the historical thing of the bosun. It's just a big part of it, all right? Don't take anything personal, all right? If it's personal, the captain's going to bring you into his office and he's going to close the door. All right? Otherwise, take the advice from people, but don't take it personally. Don't think it's just you that's doing bad or Because then you get depressed, you get angry, or you get overmotivated and do too much work and lose sleep. So big advice, don't take things personal on the ship unless the captain really says, hey, you're messing up, come in and talk behind closed doors. You'll know it if you do bad. That's something else I wanted to bring up. All right, there's a lot of need for validation among new third mates. What do I mean by that? You get on board ship, and the number one complaint I hear from chief mates and captains and bosuns about new third mates is he wants me to see everything. All right, so the third mate will go out and they'll say find a problem in the CO2 room and put up a new placard with the sign on how to release the CO2 in the CO2 room. Right? Then what happens next? The third mate goes up to the chief mate and goes, hey, mate, I put up the sign. You want to go see? And the chief mate says, I'm busy right now. Well, I made the sign of red, and I made sure that the colors are all white, and you can really see the sign. I was thinking of putting another sign outdoors so people really see it. Guys, I know you want to be noticed. I know you want validation. I did too as third mate. It's a lifelong thing that's not going to get fixed anytime soon. We want people to acknowledge we're doing a good job. This is just not how the introverts in my generation and older generations work. All these attaboys, continuous attaboys. And to someone in your generation who teachers have been very vocal of your positivity and things you've done well, you're not going to get that positive feedback from, definitely not from the bosun, probably not from the captain or anyone of an older generation. You have to understand deep inside that we know when you're messing up and we know when you're doing a good job. All right? As long as you're honest and you tell us, come tell us if it's a big safety critical mess up, something that's going to affect the schedule, blah, blah, blah. We need that honesty. But other than that, if that sign looks bad in the CO2 room, I guarantee if the chief mate's any good, he's going to see it. He may not see it this hour. It may take him a week. Or more likely, he probably already saw it and was like, wow, that kid did a great job. Look at that sign. The colors thing out. All right. He was just thinking about that on his way up from the office. Wow, that third mate is really motivated, got that sign done. We're a lot safer. I want to thank him. And then what happens? The bosun comes in and the AB comes in and the chief mate forgets to thank you. But the chief mate still thinks good of you. And then you come in and go, hey, chief, I did this and I did that. And aren't you proud of me? All those good feelings and goodwill in the chief mate mind just go down the toilet. So believe me, if you're messing up, they're seeing it. And if you're doing good, they're seeing it. There aren't that many people on the ship. And especially, I loved working union tankers as third mate. One third mate. I worked for a little while. I was the only third mate. I loved it because for 4 months, if anything was wrong with any of the fire stations, that's my fault, and I had no one to blame. When I got on the oil rigs and you were working a month on, a month off, and there were split crews and schedules, we didn't know. It was that guy's fault, this guy's fault. We just didn't know, and that can lead to things dropping through. But being the only third mate, I knew that if I did those fire stations, people would notice because there has been no one else, no other safety officer on here for 2 months. So you have to trust that they are watching and they are seeing. But remember, my generation aren't the pat on the back. My dad's saying when I was a kid, I used to come home and, Dad, I got a 100 on this exam. He'd say, did you ask for extra credit? I'd say, no, Dad, but I did really well. I studied. He'd say, you want a medal or a chest of pinning on, John? My dad's generation, what I grew up with, it was seen as a negativity to ask for praise. You were talking the war years. My dad was in Vietnam. His dad was in World War II. If you didn't do your job properly, men died. It was just expected that you do your job. And now, thankfully, we're in a new generation where people who work hard get praised all the time, and I think that's a great thing. but don't seek out that praise. Don't go and see it. Understand that from our generation perspective, if you're messing up the lifeboats or the things, we know about it, all right? If you're doing a great job on those lifeboats and things, we know about it. There are only 24 people on the ship. The captain knows everything, everyone's abilities, not because he's clairvoyant or skeptic or just a super smart guy. He knows exactly how well you're doing because you're the only one touching those fire stations, and there are only 24 people on the ship. You know, I used to have a sign on my desk for a little while. This isn't rocket science or I wouldn't be here. You know, don't try to overcomplicate the job. Don't make the job more difficult. And seeking praise all the time, you know, just realize a lot of the guys, especially the bosun, aren't going to praise you. But just because they don't praise you doesn't mean they're thinking when they're alone and they're recharging in their cabin alone. If you're doing a good job, they're very appreciative. And they're thinking about you. They just don't know how to express it all the time. Jimmy says, I'm a young skipper. Once I had an AB who didn't want to work. The only thing he said is, I don't know about that, so I don't do it. In the end, I had to send him home. Do you have some advice how to deal with an AB who isn't interested in the job? I have some great advice, Jimmy. And that's a great question. And one I struggled with for many years as chief mate before I found the answer to your question. And I think it's the most effective. So we had kind of a gap. You know, when I first started, it wasn't uncommon, even in the 90s, for an AB, the chief mate, to go, hey, boss, AB screwing off. And the bosun would call the AB down to the lower engine room or the cargo hole, and the AB would come back with a black eye. That really happened, guys. All right? It really happened that way. The bosuns were tough guys who used some brute intimidation, some force to get the job done, some nasty words. That went away in the 2000s. You know, you can get in big trouble as a captain for doing that, condoning that if it happens on your ship, and for good reason. We don't need to bleed by hitting anyone. It's Neanderthal. It's the old way. If that happens on your ship, you should have no tolerance for it. I agree 100%. But there were many years that we're left without tools. How do we motivate the guy who just refuses to be motivated? And my answer for that, Jimmy, is think back to when you were a third mate or an AB, and what was the thing that you hated most? There is a punishment worse than getting beaten. I remember when I was a kid, I'd screw up something. I was a bit of a troublemaker as a kid, and I'd screw up, and I'd go home, and my mom would be talking to me for an hour. You could do better. You could do this. You could do that. Why are you doing it? Your disappointment. I'd be thankful don't tell your dad. And I'd be thinking, man, I wish my dad knew, because he'd hit me once, and it'd be over with. I wouldn't have to sit here for 4 hours listening to this. So I've tried this many times as chief mate, and I can report 100% success. The thing I hated the most as AB is when the chief mate or captain bird watches me, man. When they're over my shoulder being overly helpful. So the first time this happened, I keep bringing up this lifeboat inspection. We had an AB, he'd go in the lifeboat, he'd check a couple things, then he'd leave. And we found some major deficiencies, and he just wasn't checking, wasn't doing it. And I brought him up and I said, hey, buddy, the lifeboat, we found some problems, and I think they're problems. I don't know if they happened when you were inspecting or weren't inspecting. But what I want to do is I realized I never taught you how to inspect a lifeboat. I never sat down and gave you the information you need. So I can't yell at you for doing this wrong, but this is safety. We're all in the same boat. You know, bring in that social thing. Explain to him the importance of that boat to the safety of the crew, to his friends, and for him personally, put it on him if you want to get back to your family. And then I went into the boat, and every single piece of equipment that there was, I sat there and I gave him an explanation. This is a sponge. The sponge has to be big enough in order to capture the water, and we have to wring out the water and take it out. In a hot lifeboat, I was in there for 6 hours mentoring this guy on every piece of equipment. I didn't say I had a way to deal with this that wasn't miserable. Let me tell you, I probably was more miserable than this AB, but you could tell him, and every time as we get through, he goes, oh, I got it, mate. I got it. No need to help me now. I got it. And I believed he did, but I continued to sit down there. And then very next week, we were scooping out the brine in the brine tank. And these guys kept on going down and forgetting their safety gear. And the rate of work was just slow as hell. So I go, don't fault them. They'll just get angry and indignant. But what you want to say is, I realized we did not provide you the training. The company values training. Put it on the company. The company makes me fill out so many mentor hours. I'm going to come down and mentor with you guy. And I just went down and start doing the bucket and showing them, hey, these, just talking the whole time. You don't want to just go down there and work. A lot of captains do that. They say, well, I won't require you to do anything I wouldn't do. And they go down there and they work next to the guys, and it doesn't always work. And the reason is, it's not about butting up with the guys. It's not about becoming their buddy. It's about the misery of being watched and explained to things in a very simplistic term. So when I go down the brine, I'd say, hey, let me tell you about the confined spaces and the blowers. And I'd just talk for a couple of hours down in those brine tanks. And I'm telling you, I never had a problem before. They would do anything they can for me not to go in that lifeboat, because they can inspect that lifeboat in 20 minutes. But if I got to go in there, it would be 6 hours. And I actually had one AB call the office and yell and report me for abuse or something. And I got told about it right away. The poor captain was on the ship. He came in and he said, let's talk about this. And he said, you have a complaint against the captain? The guy goes, yeah. This guy's punishing me. And the poor captain said, well, what's he doing? Well, he's explaining to me all this lifeboat equipment, and we're in there for 6 hours, and it's hot, and we're sweating. And he said, oh, the captain, the poor captain was like, oh, the captain's torturing you. He won't let you have water? No, we had water breaks, and we went out for coffee, and he just was explaining it and going on and on. And, let me tell you, the poor captain did not accept his version of the story. He said, what's the worst thing the captain did? And the AB's answer was, well, he smiled. He smiled at me and told me I could do it. That arrogant. And it didn't end well for that AB, but he ended up getting on board. So double down on your training, get down there with the guys, but don't just be a bullshit session. Sit down there and work with those guys, explain to those guys, watch them, teach them. No one likes to be explained to. And if that doesn't work for you, I'd say, Jimmy, think back to when you were an AB. What was the one thing that motivated you? What was the one thing you hated most the captain to do? And maybe do a little bit of that. All right. Michael says, I would advise anyone looking at going to sea as a career is don't. Stay on at school or look for a different career path ashore. Hey, Michael's got a good point. This is a rough and difficult life. It's a lot of time away. And, I went into it knowing I'd want to go to sea and loving the sea through my 20s. And then I had a family, and now I'm away from my son. I missed my son Jack's birth. It's a hard life, guys, but there's something about, I'd say you're right, Michael. I'd say you're right, Michael, but the question is more, and I'm seeing that this is, I'm seeing the screen still blue. I don't know why. So I'm going to reload it. But I'd say the question is, if you don't love this job, if you don't love being out in the ocean, if there's not something of you really yearning to go out there and be on the ship, if you're unsure, if you're not sure if this is something you want, if you're doing it just for the money, there are easier ways to make money, guys. You got to really want to do this. So, I remember, guys, all the time, the worst cook I ever had, and let me tell you, cook is probably the most important job on the ship, man. Those guys are always like, oh, I don't matter. I'm just the cook. Man, you matter. Let me tell you, good food on a ship, give me some thumbs up if you think the cook matters. If you think the cook plays an important part on the ship, because I tell you, a great cook can make the experience, but a bad cook is a significant problem. So they'd always say, oh, I don't matter. I don't. Forget about that. You matter. But the worst cook I ever had said he didn't want to be a cook. He was just doing it for the money. And, he'd rather be in, when he went into Piney Point, he said, hey, what's the easiest job out there? And someone told him cook. And they were full of, guys, don't do this because someone told you it's easy. Don't do this because someone told you it's a lot of money. There are other ways to make money. And that's my parting comment here. Thank you very much. It's Friday night. I got to get home with the family. Today's pizza and movie night with the kids. I hope I gave a few tips to the new third mate here and something that you guys can use. If you have any questions too, put a comment, message me, or if you want to contact me directly, john@gCaptain.com. I'd love to answer the thing. I love working with the new millennials and new third mates. And I think you put a fresh perspective on this industry that we really need. So thank you for getting out there and working aboard ships. And have a good weekend.